how can you be locked in if you're not focused on the one who has the key? Right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to my channel and welcome back into another episode of the Carlos Granados podcast. Today's podcast episode, we're going to be responding to a lot of the comments that had been left in TikTok. I guess talking about Nayib Bukele in El Salvador either intrigued a lot of people. It made people feel some type of way. Oh, they really were supporting what I was saying in those videos. But today, as promised, and as I commented, I was going to reply to some of the comments to clarify certain things and where we're coming from. In the video that I made before the last video, of course, there was a little passion towards the things that I was saying because it's a country I was born in, right? And it's the people that I care for, and it's the country that I've always loved, right? So I want to respond to some comments to clarify and, of course, discuss a little bit more about the situation. So I'm going to go through my TikTok comments now. And by the way, if you guys are listening, you can watch this video in 4K on YouTube on my YouTube channel, Carlos Granados. Just click on the playlist, the podcast playlist, and all my episodes for the podcast will be found there. And if you're watching this video on 4K on YouTube already, go support and, go share, maybe leave your comments and ratings on all the audio platforms you can think of. You'll find us there at Carlos Granados podcast. So let's begin this video. Oh, by the way, wait. Yesterday, La Selecta won. We beat Guatemala. Los Patojitos. Hey, listen. Man, thinking about La Selecta, it's like going back to your toxic boyfriend or girlfriend, it's hard to leave them, but you always want to find that good in them. Yesterday, they pulled through, which if you're a real fan and you really love your country, you watch them and you support them regardless. So La Selecta, we're always going to be there, even if they break our hearts most of the time. But sometimes you get those nights like last night where they win and they give you hope. Now, there's a possibility, and a very good possibility, that they're probably going to break those hopes, but it doesn't matter. We're here. We're locked in. And we're going to be delusional and keep supporting. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, let's discuss. So, one of the first videos that I uploaded was in regards to Nayib Bukele's dictatorship, quote unquote dictatorship, right? And to be honest, a lot of people have different opinions on the dictator part. I don't believe really it's a dictatorship. And if it is a dictatorship, it's probably one of the best ones we have seen in the world. And people have commented before, it's just the beginning, it's just, but we're gonna use that in a little bit. We're gonna make some points in regards to that. All right, so let's get right into the TikTok comments. One of the comments that got a lot of movement was, the opinion of us Salvadorans living abroad shouldn't determine the future of the country, but the ones living there, right? So what this person is saying, by the way, I know this person commented, so shout out to you. You know who you are. It's all good. It's all conversation, no hard feelings. It's all love. So what he's saying is the people that live abroad, the Salvadorians that live abroad, should not have a say on what is going on in the country because we're not living in it, right? The only people that should have any say should be the ones living there. But I completely disagree. I don't think that is correct, and I don't think that's right. And let me tell you why. El Salvador, first of all, right? The economy for El Salvador, a lot of the reason why people are surviving in El Salvador, not just living, surviving, is because of the Salvadorians that are living abroad, specifically in the United States, that are sending money back home for people that can't make it there because of, El Salvador's economy I don't think has ever been well since I've been alive, if I'm being honest, my 32 years. So they need an outside source of income, right? Something called a remesa, right? You send remesas back. We send remesas back from the States or abroad back to El Salvador so people can live. So how can we as people, first of all, Salvadorians that lived in El Salvador at one point for right, and we had to move out. But why are the reasons? Why? What are the reasons as to why El Salvador's have to move out, had to move out of El Salvador and move abroad? One, because of the war that was happening back in the 80s, right? We all know about that. We heard our parents, our grandparents discuss that. We've heard so many stories about that, right? So they left one wave. The second wave, and maybe even third wave, was because of the gang violence, right? You were scared for your life. You were threatened that you might be killed if you don't pay your rent. You don't give them money. You don't do as they say. So they were running the country. The gangs were running the country, and people left because they were afraid, and other people left because of the financial situation, right? So those are some of the main reasons as to why people left. And some of those people are our family members that we live in the States or we live abroad. And those people are the ones supporting the ones at home, the family, the friends, right? So how come we don't have a say on what happens when we are supporting those specific family members? So what you're saying is we can send money to them and support their living and help them survive. By the way, not just live. These are not just gifts. They are surviving off this money, right? But we don't have a say on who maybe we get to elect, who we get to support as Salvadorians. They were most of those people, or if not a lot of them, were born in El Salvador. What do you mean we don't have a say on our country, on what's happening, just because we don't live there? Yeah, well, the people that do live there are barely making it, and if not, the only reason they're making it is because of the remesas we're sending back. So without us, they don't live. So the people that you're claiming that should only have an opinion, should only have a say in the country, the only reason they're living and surviving is because of us. So if we don't send money back, then essentially they're gonna have to do what their family members do or did, move out of the country and find somewhere new. But guess what? Some of them can't. Some of them don't want to, right? So if we don't do that, then they possibly will not survive in El Salvador, right? They won't have any access to the resources because El Salvador's economy, we all know, has been bad for a very long time. I made also another video talking in my prior podcast video about El Salvador's economy and how the US dollar was not the best idea for El Salvador at that specific time. But we can get that in a little bit later. But the point here is, without us, the economy itself in El Salvador doesn't really function. So what the president now, Nayib Bukele, is trying to do is trying to find ways to bring companies to El Salvador so there could be jobs created. Now, is it a perfect way to do it? I mean, what is a perfect way, right? Without certain people, and innocent people, and maybe some people not having fairness. I don't know, but you can't just focus on that. I think we have to focus on the fact that Nayib Bukele is trying to take action and is making that happen, right? With letting other companies come in and letting them know, hey, El Salvador is more intriguing than ever before, right? Your company could be supported here, right? The wages that you pay our people could be lower than other countries, right? We'll give you tax cuts, whatever. I mean, you name it, right? Another reason, tourism. I mean, come on. Tourism in El Salvador is huge. Now, for the people that live in the rural areas and maybe areas that you can't get to, you probably won't see that much, right? But El Salvador is a small country. So if somebody goes to El Salvador, you're probably going to have some type of access or exposure to tourism, right? People who travel from abroad to El Salvador to experience what's happening in El Salvador, right? And when it comes to the beaches, its people, its culture, the food. When you think about land features, it's just everything that you would think uh, an outside country outside of the states will look like. It's just very, very beautiful. And I'm not just saying out of bias because it's where I was born. It's just really truly is, man. And people are starting to find out. And there is this huge wave of like, dude, everybody's going to El Salvador right now because they are experiencing what we've always had. But unfortunately, people never wanted to go. To El Salvador because of the amount of violence that there was, right? The amount of gang violence, the amount of corruption that was never taken care of, right? I, I mean, it's an obvious thing. 1+1 in this situation equals 2. People are not going to want to travel to your country, not going to want to see anything, want to spend their money over there if they don't feel safe, if they feel like their life is at risk, right? I mean, even Salvadorians left, like I mentioned earlier, to another country. They moved abroad because we were scared for our life. So if if President Bukele took care of one of the main issues, I feel like people underplay it so much, right? People are talking about cleaning the streets as if it's a small feat. I mean, it's one of the biggest things he has done and anyone has done for our country. You could not imagine the streets being cleaned 10 years ago. You just couldn't fathom that. And in 6 years, the amount of changes that have happened in El Salvador, I mean, are tremendous. But people want to nitpick the small things, right? The little things. Oh, what about the little guy? What do you mean the little guy? We've always been the little guy. It's not just us. Everybody has been the little guy in El Salvador at one point, you know? We've always been that way. So let's not nitpick at things now that are not as big as to what he has accomplished in the country so far. And people want him to get things done as if it was a first world country. My bad, I couldn't speak right there. But the thing is, though, now people are judging El Salvador, which is this is a crazy part, and this is the dilemma. You know why people nitpick so much? Because now El Salvador is becoming to a point where it's being judged as a first world country. We're moving into the second world, right? But it's being looked at upon that way because of who's running it, because of the president who's running it, right? The amount of success he has had in the country in the last 6 years. 6, guys. It's only been 6. We're acting as if this man has been there for like 20. I mean, I wouldn't mind him being there for 20, but he's only been there for 6 years. And look at what he has done for the country. Now, is it all him? No, right? But I think a lot of people have bought in, and people abroad like ourselves has bought into what he's trying to do. And another point that people were making in the comment section on social media, I think this is a fair point, and I'm gonna try to deliver this in the most humblest way that I can. Unfortunately, people in El Salvador, and I actually just spoke to somebody that lives in El Salvador yesterday, by the way. So shout out to Eduardo. We had a really educational conversation about the situation because he's seen me I'm posting a lot of videos about Naib in El Salvador, and he has a lot of insight on everything that's going on over there, and he has different views, and we've talked about them, right? So, unfortunately, a lot of people in El Salvador are not very well educated, so they don't know what a first world country looks like. They don't know what a economy that is thriving looks like. They haven't experienced a government that comes in and is trying to do the best for their country. Has everything that needs to be done been accomplished yet? No, I agree with a lot of people in that way, right? There's a lot to get done, but there's also a lot that has been done. Why cannot we acknowledge that, right? That there is a government that has cared for its people and it wants to care for its people, but unfortunately, El Salvador as resources, we don't have enough of that. And what the president is trying to do is trying to bring those resources so El Salvador can sustain itself, right? When it comes to money, when it comes to education, everything else you can think of. And the people in El Salvador, because of the lack of education, because of the lack of carelessness, if I'm being honest, a lot of them just care about themselves, and that's the way they were raised. Because if you don't look after yourself, then you're not gonna survive, right? Point proven. It's been like that since since I was born over there, right? Since my whole life essentially. So there isn't that sense of wanting everyone to do better. It's just look out after yourself, right? But us as Salvadorians abroad, we have seen what a country that is doing well looks like, right? What a different type of life looks like, right? And most of us abroad, the one that left, we understand what it looks like. That's the reason I think a lot of us agree with what Bukele is trying to do, because we have seen this, we have experienced this, we know what it looks like, we understand what is, for lack of better words, the good side of things, right? And unfortunately, the people in El Salvador, they haven't seen that, they haven't experienced that, they've only hear about it, right? But they don't know what that looks like. We have. And I mean, is it the perfect way to go about things? I don't know. But I do know that we're being proactive in El Salvador, and the country in El Salvador is being proactive to make things happen. And I think that's the point we have to take. That's the thing we have to take with all of this. We are actually being proactive into making changes. Changes sometimes feel off if you're not used to them, and especially if you only know one life for the people in El Salvador. But changes are a requirement in order for you to get better, right? In order for you to see what is it that you're lacking, what are the improvements, right? Originally, we didn't need to change anything to know that our violence was something we needed to change, right? We needed to clean up the streets, right? We need to find ways to bring more people here to spend their money in El Salvador so the money can flow, and hopefully one day El Salvador can sustain itself without the remesas out of people who live here. I think it's just, economics 101. Hopefully that gets to that point. We don't know if it will. We're hoping it does, right? Because now, not only are other companies investing in El Salvador, but people who came to the States and they live in other countries and they did well for themselves, they're going back and investing money in El Salvador, buying, a whole bunch of assets, maybe, thinking about businesses that will give other people jobs. I mean, you name it, but at least money is going back home, right? And money hopefully stays there, because a lot of people I've been hearing, at least around my family and friends, they want to go retire in El Salvador, right? So that money that they have built in other places will go back to the homeland and being spent there, right? Why is that hard to acknowledge? Why is that, something that we just can't give a lot of credit to? Again, is there a lot of things that Nayib Bukele has to work on? Yeah. Again, but it's only been 6 years, man. I made a comment last time and I was like, yeah, he's not Jesus. What do you want him to do? What do you want him to do? In more than 6 years. I mean, that's probably one of the best jobs that anybody has done for a country in 6 years in those times. And I think you have to take into consideration that people that live abroad, that people who are born there, everyone, but you can't deny the work that has been done in El Salvador so far. So let's move on into other countries. Give me 1 second. Let me look at other TikTok comments, because I'm telling you guys, we've been getting active on TikTok. There's a lot of people have different opinions, which is, I think, is a beautiful thing, to be honest. Again, there was one person, by the way, that made a comment which it doesn't make sense to me. Oh, I went to El Salvador and one of the roads was not painted. I'm like, that's the problem. That's your issue. The lines were not painted in the road. So people, really? That's how we've come. I'm like, dude, listen, if that's the problem that we're having now, I am glad that's a problem, right? From where we came from all the gang violence and deaths we had, from the murder capital of the world that we had, from people not wanting to go to El Salvador in the first place. The only reason you probably know the lines on the road or the streets were not painted was because now you have access to that road, right? Maybe now there is a way where you can travel and feel safe to get to those roads. You know why? Because of what the president has done cleaning the streets. This is what I'm saying when you nitpick a lot. That's the problem. I'm glad that that's an issue. And you know what? That's an issue that can be solved. But I don't think painting the street and the road is a priority, brother. Not right now, at least. not there's other things that need to be taken care of. We need to get our health system better, our healthcare, because in El Salvador it's still bad. And people, even about the healthcare, oh yeah, people, we don't have healthcare. It's bad, this and that. Yeah, it's been like that for like 30 years, 40 years, man. But it's a flow system. It's like a pyramid. The major things will try to be fixed as best as they can for other things to flow down and be well, and fix the healthcare system, right? Take care of the animals and the land and the ecosystem. It is just part of the process. But there are certain things that had to be done for that to happen. And it's, again, 6 years, man, with a country. It's not a very long time. It really not. You have to look at things into perspective. Also, by the way, oh my God, and I almost forgot this, and this is something that a subject that I really wanted to discuss, because recent news came about how El Salvador, it's banning the Edgar haircut, right? You guys all know what the Edgar haircuts look like. And if you don't, look it up. To be honest, I think it's a funny haircut, even though I think when I was younger, my mom used to do like a little, in El Salvador, we call it hongo, right? Like a mushroom haircut, which is almost like the Edgar haircut. And when I was little, I used to get that done. So it's funny to me because I had something like that in the past when I was a kid, obviously when it didn't represent anything bad. So a lot of people are calling Nayib and his administration a dictator even more because of what I believe is to be simple laws and regulations of not having haircuts that typically represent what in this time would be something bad, which would be, gangs or you being part of the gang. That's why people who have tattoos in El Salvador are being detained, or were being detained, or maybe still are being detained, because a lot of the people back in the day, a lot of the gang members had tattoos and they were covered in tattoos. We're talking about faces, the back, the head, chest, you name it. Everything was filled with tattoos, and that represented evil. That represented gang violence. That represented terrorism to the country. So what I tell people is, I know it's unfair to some people who want to express themselves freely through haircuts, through earrings, through tattoos. I understand, but it's not about that right now. It's about sending a message like, hey, we are not playing, right? We want your kids to follow the law, to not break the law, right? We want to educate them now, even if it's through almost like military action. But we want to educate them now instead of educating when they're grown. And what that means, when you're grown, you end up in Secot, right? You that's where you end up. We don't want to have to get to that point. Let's do it now. And listen, wait. I promise you want to keep listening to this, because this is a prime and a great example that I have for you guys. And this is how I know people are nitpicking and cherry picking what they want to find bad or negative about the country. Let me tell you why. Back in the day when I was younger, I lived from El Salvador from obviously when I was born till I was 10 years old. I left the country till I was 10 years old. And a lot of people, you guys don't know this, but in El Salvador, when you go to school, you wear uniforms, right? It's always been like that. When I was young, I mean, we're talking about when I was 10, I'm 32 now, so 22 plus years ago, we always wore uniforms. If your haircut was not a clean haircut, if it was a messy haircut, if you had a haircut that they deemed as inappropriate, they will not let you into the school. This haircut and this law that the president is supposedly passing and taking people's rights away and making them feel as if, like, you know, it's a dictator. No, dude, we've had this for 22 plus years in El Salvador. So I don't want to hear anything about this nonsense. It's nonsense. This is the way we've always been. But you know why El Salvador lost a lot of that? Because of the violence that was in the country. Because now, you know who told you what you could wear and the haircut that you could have? Gang members, gang leaders. If they saw you rocking a similar haircut that represented them, they will tell you, cut your hair. Don't wear this clothes. Don't get tattooed like this because we'll harm you. And remember, harm in this situation, violence means you're going to be unalive, right? You're going to be killed. Gang violence control that. Gang members control that. So it wasn't the government then. It was actual gang members controlling how you dictated how you were supposed to be, how you represented yourself, right? But how come then you guys were not saying, oh, they're a bunch of dictators? Where was your fight then? Where were you guys at then? Going to the gang members and coming up to them and, you know, being these keyboard warriors talking about, hey, don't be a dictator to those innocent people. Let them be free. Yeah, you weren't there. I wonder why. But now that you hear the president talking about and passing all these laws and these regulations, now it's a problem. But when the gang members were running the streets of El Salvador, where was the love then? Where was your care for the people? Exactly my point, man. And let me continue to give you on the dress code that we had for school, by the way. So you needed uniforms. And it did not matter if you were the poorest people in El Salvador. If your kid did not bring a uniform to school, he was not going to be able to get access to education. That's how strict I was raised 22 years ago. Now, am I justifying it? No, of course not. But this has been the point I'm trying to make is this has been going for years, man. For years. My mom used to wear uniforms. So we're talking even 40 plus years, 40, 50 plus years. El Salvador has always been run this way. It's nothing new, guys. If your shoes, listen to this, if your shoes were not black or a certain type of shoe and they were not polished, you were not granted access to the school. You were not going to be given an education. And this is not me spewing stuff. This is actually me telling you what it was like. I was there. I experienced it. My mom used to take me to class, to school, right? Because typically in El Salvador, you typically walk to school or you ride a bike to school, depending on how far it is. But most of the time, from kindergarten to probably high school, what you would consider high school here, you probably walk or took a bike to school. So my mom used to take me to school. And every time when I used to get there, if you didn't have a belt, right? Even a belt, if you didn't have a belt and your shirt was not tucked in, you were not granted access to school. you were not gonna get an education. So she used to take me to school. You know, she used to polish my shoes, make sure my hair was done well, and then give me a little lunchbox, and I would get into school every day. That's how a lot of us had it the whole time. But you've never heard about it. If anything, you know what's crazy? When I came to the States and I started going to school here, I found it so weird at the fact that we could go to school with just some jeans and a shirt, any shoes you wanted. I asked my mom, I was like, wait, where's my uniform? I was like, where's my uniform? I was like, no, kids go here, you know, typically as they please. They have dress codes, but the clothes you wear necessarily typically doesn't matter. You can just go sometimes as much as, to be honest, let's be honest now, you could go as you please, even though they had dress codes. You know what I mean? You were still gonna get access granted, you know, to education, and you were in the classroom. They probably gave you a shirt if you were showing too much, but it's not strict as it is over there. So I'm like, where's my uniform? You know, what am I supposed to wear? Where are my shoes? Oh no, you know, wear your jeans, maybe your shorts and your shoes, your tennis shoes, by the way, and a shirt, and you call it a day. Right? There is no laws or enforcement when it comes to your hair, the type of haircut you should have. You could a lot of the times wear earrings if you wanted, male or female. You didn't have to wear belts if you know, if everything fit tight. You didn't have to polish your shoes every day because typically you wear tennis shoes or something like that. And I'm like, dang, well, this is totally different. It felt like freedom, right? It felt like freedom. But that's because I wasn't used to any of that in El Salvador, right? So now that I see this and what's happening with the Edgar haircut, with the education system being more militarized, guys, it's nothing new. We've had this in El Salvador for a long time. This is how we've been carried for the longest. Kids are used to this. They're not oppressing them, you know? But if a country that had been suffering from violence and gang violence had been suffering for a very long time, then maybe you do want to send a message as a country, right? The President Bukele talked about this recently, and it was I think in a he was making a statement, and he said we have to, if the parents don't take care of the kids, then everything we do is useless. And he has a point. Right? But we're trying to enforce certain things so the kids can be raised well. You know, we don't want to have to punish them when they're adults for the mistakes and the things that they should have learned when they were kids. You know what I mean? You know, and this is bad, and you can have your opinion on this. But in El Salvador, there was a certain point where I was still in the age where teachers had rulers, you know, the long meter rulers, and they would be allowed to hit you. Now, it was not a written rule. It's kind of like an unwritten rule. It's like you understood, hey, I'm a teacher. You're acting bad in school? Bring that ass over here. Bam. Couple hits with the ruler, the long meter ruler, right? You also had the small ruler, the wooden ruler, right? Where if you were acting up or acting bad, put your hands out. Smack you in the hands, right? Sometimes you will end up crying. You were not going home and were like, yo, you know, the professor, you know, he punished me for acting bad. The first thing the parents would be like, why were you acting bad? Because teachers doing that to kids was normalized. I'm not saying it's right. Or maybe that I'm in agreement with it. But I'm just letting you know the extent of what El Salvador used to be like and what the school system used to be like. So what Nayib Bukele and the presidency and the administration is doing and the head of education over there, it's nothing new, man. We've had it like this for the long time. So don't be keyboard warriors over here talking about it's unfair. They're not expressing themselves. You know, that the lack of expression because of the haircut, they can't be themselves. Hey, listen, we were like this before. You know who ran that part afterwards? The gang members. So you choose. Do you prefer having Nayib Bukele running a system like this, or the gang members in the gang violence? Which, by the way, if the gang members chose this route and you chose that route, you're probably gonna end up dying. They will definitely harm you because you're trying to represent something you're not. On the other hand, you have a president that is telling you this is the way it's supposed to be done, right? And this is the way I see fit, I see best to carry out certain things. But I'm gonna make sure you're educated, that you understand laws, that you understand authority. Because when it was gangs running the street, there was no appreciation for authority. If anything, authority was looked down upon. They would harm a lot of police members, right? That's like a badge of honor if you killed a police member, because there was no respect for authority. But he's trying to implement what we used to have anyways. It's a system that we've always had. And I promise you, what I'm telling you is coming from my heart. It's true. I've lived it. I experienced. I had, if you acted bad at school, professors or teachers that would, they will give you a couple hits or not. Not even parents do that now here in the States nowadays, to their kids. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but it's been there for the longest. I've experienced it. I've witnessed it. I've lived it. I've been there, guys. So it's funny how now, all these media platforms and people around the world that don't have no idea what El Salvador used to be like, we came from that, I could go to school now here looking like this, showing my pride with my country, this and that. And El Salvador back in the day, and probably now without, we can't show up like that. You want to go get an education, be well-dressed, right? Represent yourself well. And the thing that I want to add to that too, if you were poor, man, it was hard for those people to provide those uniforms for the kids. There was kids who were going back to the same uniforms back-to-back years. It was a struggle. But it's been like that for a while. Even the textbooks, or the books, the notebooks, I should say, that you used to take notes in, the notebooks, listen to how strict it was back in the day. The notebooks, if they were not wrapped correctly, and I mean wrapped, it's like in a clear coating wrap. You know what I mean? Not like a present wrap, but like a clear coating. And if your notebooks were not wrapped in a certain way, you couldn't use those notebooks to write notes in school. You had to have it correctly wrapped in order for you to be in class. That's how military we were. I mean, to the dot, because you only hear this type of laws and regulations and strictness in military, right? But we have always been raised with a military mindset. Not in the sense of going to war and dying and, shooting guns and stuff. No, but everything else, it was just like that. You couldn't get access to education if certain things were not done correctly. And it was that simple. And people follow those rules. How come now it's hard for them to do it again? The only reason it seems kind of crazy and almost out of this world is because the people who had control over that before were, took over that in that sense, were the gang members and everything that was going on with the violence, right? But now it's the government taking control back again. So they are deciding what is right for the education system. And to be honest, you don't have to tell me twice who I prefer to have running that. You know what I mean? It's because I've seen the other side. And that's what I try to tell people a lot. You don't know what it was like before. You don't know who really had control. You have no idea. I respect the fact that you want to fight for people, that you want, innocent people to have their rights. I get it, man. But I've said this time and time again. There has never been peace in the world without innocent people taking a hit, without them suffering. El Salvador is no different. And it's an unfortunate act of events, and it happens. but we got to look at the bigger picture here. We got to look at what El Salvador once was and what it's now. It's not anymore. Are there a lot of things that need to be fixed, that they need to be worked on? Of course. I'm not denying that. I'm reasonable and I'm objective. I'm not denying that at all. But when you make those comments and statements, make sure that you also give credit for what President Bukele has done for the last 6 years for the country. And don't get me wrong. Listen. From what I've seen, he's a God-fearing man. I'm a God-fearing man. Our families, a lot of Salvadorians, whether Catholic or Christians, we're God-fearing families. We don't idolize Nayib Bukele, but we have a huge amount of respect for what he has done, because nobody had the guts or the balls to do what he did. And that's what we appreciate so much. That's why the people who live abroad support him so much. The reason they lost their homes, their family, their life was because of all the corruption, all the gang violence, the murders, the killings. They had to flee. And now they have what was theirs once. They have it back. They got that back. It's not hard to understand why the people abroad and people in the States support him so much. We are just as Salvadorians as the people that live there. You know what I mean? Even if you were born in the States from Salvadorians that migrated here, you are just as Salvadorian, bro. That's your homeland still. That's your family. That's your people. And those and some of the kids who were born here from parents who migrated because of the war and the gang violence, things of that nature, years ago, they're growing up, and some of them, for the first time ever, they're going to El Salvador and getting to experience where their family grew up. They're getting to appreciate that the house that they grew up in, the streets, and maybe they even get to feel blessed at what they have here in the United States. The amount of resources, the amount of first world accommodations that we have, right? It's different. And you go back to your parents' country for the first time ever, and I know this because I've spoken to some of them, and they're like, dude, man, like, that's where our parents grew up? That's crazy. But there is an appreciation to that. You experience something different now. You experience a different lifestyle. This is what they like. So I think I don't think that's a fair point. But I did wanted to make sure that that I express that so people can understand why I strongly and respectfully disagree with those comments. All right, let's get into other comments. Let's see if we have one more that we can find a good one. There's a lot of things that people said in these comments. I'm not gonna lie, it's gotten very active on my YouTube section. And to be honest, that's perfectly fine with me. I have no problem with people sharing their opinion. If anything, I think it creates for a better future. Definitely having conversation and looking at different perspectives, it helps growth. Helps growth 100% of the time. So, I talked about the dollar too last time, or how I think the dollar was a bit mistake, but you guys can have an opinion on that. On that as well. Let's see if I find something else. Let's see what else we can. There were so many comments made, man, but there was a lot of people on both sides of the coin, and it was interesting to see. It was interesting to gather so much information from different people. There was comments like, my family is able to go back without fear. My dad is a vet and he has gone back as well. Like, come on, man. That itself is a true blessing. Like, I don't know how we can say anything, crazy about that situation. Oh, it's like we currently have no other choice. Those who criticize Bukele heavily don't know anything about the history of El Salvador. I think you got to know the history. And I think, you know what, the last thing I'm going to say, because it's clicking in my head, what people were saying with the dictatorship factor. Okay, so let's talk about the quote unquote dictatorship of Nayib Bukele, right? So are his actions of him, you know, changing the laws and regulations so he could be elected again, is that a form of dictatorship? Yes, right. But there is a reason why around 90% of the people wanted to reelect him. 90% approval, right? At least these are the numbers that they're showing. But a lot of people are in agreement with that. So you look at that as a dictatorship, but dictatorship in your eyes has always been bad. From history, it hasn't been the best. It's always been viewed in a negative light, understandably so. But why don't you give Nayib Bukele a chance, right? Where point to me where was the last dictator that actually did the amount of changes positively for a country as Nayib Bukele has done and continues to do in 6 years, by the way. We went from the murder capital of the world, I think in 2015, to one of the cleanest in the nation. And yes, I understand El Salvador is small. A lot of people were like, oh, El Salvador only has like 6 million people or something. It's a small country. Yeah, we're talking about per capita though. If you don't know what that is, then you might need to do your research on that. So how come we don't give the credit when it's due, when it comes from murder per capita leading the world to now one of the cleanest per capita in the nation. I mean, in the world, right? According to them, 1,000 days since he started being a president, Salvador has gone 1,000 days in between that time without a homicide. I mean, if again, your form of dictatorship and from history is a negative one. What we're seeing in El Salvador is a positive one. And he has to make changes and decisions that he sees fit for the country. Will people disagree with him? Yeah. But when do people ever agree with anything 100%? Right? Again, let's not act as if cleaning the streets from gang members is a small feat, guys. We always go back to that, but because of the cleaning of the streets is why everything else is happening now. It doesn't happen without that factor. None of this happens without that factor. So let's move on to the point of, oh, people were making comments of, it starts great, but you'll see when he has a lot of power and he wants to do whatever he wants, you'll see that he will just bring the country down because it's all about power. Well, to be honest, I don't think he has shown that it's all about power. Again, is it all about power? What would be the purpose of you trying to clean and wipe the streets just to gain power over a country? Why would you want these multi-million and billion-dollar companies to come to your country so it can successfully, hopefully one day, sustain itself on its economy for its people? You know what I mean? Why is he building all these roads, even though you might not think he is, but some of the main roads he's fixed? Why do you think he's doing, trying to act as a first world country with third world country resources? He wants people in El Salvador to think that way. He wants people in El Salvador to actually understand what it looks like. And in the future, could things change? Sure. I give you that 100%. Is there a possibility that it could get out of hand? 100%. There's always a possibility for that. But again, if this is what right now a dictatorship, quote unquote, according to you guys, some of you guys, a dictatorship is looking like, then let it be that way. This is the best El Salvador has ever been. You guys are talking about, oh, wait until it gets bad. I'm like, brother, it's been bad. We've been at the bottom of the bottom. There is nothing worse we can get down to, bro. There's nothing worse we can get down to. You talk about, they always bring the Venezuela, right? Look at Venezuela, what it used to be. Look what it's at now, bro. We in El Salvador have been down bad forever, and we kept going down and down and down. There was never a point in time where it went up, down, right? This fluctuation. No, it's been downhill this whole time. We've hit rock bottom. We cannot get worse in El Salvador. We can't. We've been the worst. What do you think? Imagine this. Gang members are running your country. Gang violence every day. Isn't the government is in with the gang members? There was nothing for us. There was nothing for those people at all. And you're talking about wait until Nayib Bukele becomes this dictator and you guys will hit rock bottom and, it will get worse. I'm like, dude, it can't get worse. I need you to understand this. It cannot get worse for us. What could happen is we have it better, and now maybe in the future it gets bad. But we cannot go down to what it used to be. Does that make sense? We can't. We've been that bad. How do I explain this in more layman's terms? We cannot get as bad as we used to be, because I think that was the bottom of a bottom that a country can get. We just had our civil war, so we can't even talk about a civil war. We had our civil war 50 years ago. In the 80s, actually, so 40 plus years ago. That was our civil war. That's why we have been down bad for so long. So get this train of thought that eventually dictatorship will lead us in a bad direction, and it will come down. It won't make your point valid if we're already the lowest of lowest, and we got out of that, and we are actually even surpassing countries who have never been down that low. And maybe in the future we go down a little bit. That's fine. That doesn't mean your point was right. That happens with every country, especially with first world countries, with leading countries. It's always been like that. But don't stop saying that eventually dictator will lead you guys into this doom. We've already been there. And now we have a president that at least has removed a lot of that. So hopefully we don't go back there one day. But I prefer him having the power over gang members, over gang violence, over my people dying, innocent people, by the way, dying every day. I prefer Nayib Bukele having that quote unquote power of dictatorship. This is why a lot of us are okay with him extending and running it back. I made this comment. I made this TikTok and this video, this shorts, talking about run it back to back, like Jordan and the Bulls in the 90s. I know that sounds very unprofessional, but run that shit back. For real, though. Because, again, we and a lot of people prefer this El Salvador. And the only way right now that we're seeing this is going up. So eventually, if we come down a little bit, that's fine. It's not meant to be perfect. But keep having that type of success. Is it sustainable? We don't know. Probably not. But max it out. And then we make changes and decisions and we move forward. So when a lot of us El Salvadorians are talking about we're okay with the dictatorship, it's not the actual meaning of the dictatorship that we're comfortable with, we're okay with. It's who's running the country that you consider a dictator that we're okay with. He is the best that we've seen. And he's one of the best leaders so far in the world, not just El Salvador and in Latin America, in the world. Nayib Bukele. There is people from other countries that are wishing and they would do so much to have a country and a leader as Nayib Bukele. Those are just facts. Why don't you ask yourself why a lot of people would want that? You think we just want a dictatorship? You think those people just want a dictatorship? No, because they see the bigger picture. They see beyond the word, quote unquote, dictator that you're bringing up, that you want to make sense of. We see beyond that. We see what what we used to be, what we were, what we are now, and where we're going. It's just that simple. Well, have mistakes been made? Yes, but we're humans. It's in our human nature to make mistakes, to fail. But why only concentrate on that? Why only concentrate on the negative light and not the positive one? Why not look at the actual positives and trust the fact that things will get better and he will try to do as much as he can while he's the president? That's all. Just keep giving him a chance. And if things need to change in the future, then those changes will be made. We'll cross that bridge when the time comes. You know what I mean? But as of right now, you got to give credit where credit is due. There's a reason as to why it's happening. And, it's happened so fast. And it's something that maybe needs to be studied, to be honest. There will be books probably written about this and research because it's that impressive. It's that admirable, I think we have to take it into consideration. So, again, not saying that this is the best way and maybe the perfect way, but it's the best way that we have seen in our nation. That's it. This is the best that our country has ever been, whether you like it or not. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'm going to leave you guys with that. So, man, but we'll probably end up getting back here again and having more discussions. So if you like, these conversations, if you like my content, don't forget to please comment, like, and subscribe, as that helps the algorithm in my YouTube channel and it grows and it reaches a lot more people. Never afraid to take constructive criticism. So if you have criticism, hey man, listen, write it down. I promise. I don't have sensitive skin. If anything, I welcome that because it helps us grow, helps everybody grow. Maybe it gives me new insight and new light into certain things that maybe I didn't think of. Fair enough. I'm not opposed to that. Not at all. So, a lot of wisdom is listening, and I'm not opposed to that at all. Right. So if you guys are listening, don't forget to, go to the audio platforms and you listen to this podcast, leave a rating so it can, help me support. By the way, I have so many things, if you want to support this channel, not just, in the chat, but you can also buy super chats, or if you want to support certain products that I partner with, right? The water filter, actually, I have it right here as well. I use this essentially every day. That you can get discounts on if you use CG code 1 at checkout. Also, I have merchandise that you can buy. There is certain scriptures that are on the back of the shirts or hoodies or whatever you want to wear, tank tops or whatever. With my logo, first of all, on the front of the shirt or whatever you buy, and in the back, one of the best things, one of the things that I felt that the Lord told me one time was, witnessing a miracle would not produce your healing. Faith will. And I used to be a person that I wanted, and to this day, I want to see things happen before I believe. But in order for them to actually happen, I need to believe first, and then the miracle will happen, right? So that is in the back of one of the shirts you can choose. And I think it's beautiful. I have another quote on there too. There's two actually that you can buy, and obviously if you want to support. But thank you guys for listening again. Thank you guys for supporting my channel. There were people on TikTok that wanted to actually have a conversation with me, and wanted to debate me, which again I'm not opposed to, and I agree to some of them. Actually, I agree to all of them. Some of them never responded back, I should say. But I would love to have people and have a conversation. And again, I think it helps us grow. I think it's something that's healthy to have healthy conversations and see different point of views. So there's a possibility that I could, end up doing that in the near future. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you guys on the next one. As always, guys, take care of yourself, take care of each other, your family. Be well, put God first, and see you guys in the next one. Peace and love.